Welcome back to the Church of Obelisk. Today we're doing a tier list for patch 732C for the carry role. And as usual with my tier list, these are based primarily on stats from high level pub games. So without further ado, let's get right into the list. First, let's start with the S tier. These are the heroes that are just currently a bit too strong and are almost always going to be a really good choice. First of all, we have Naga, who is not an every game kind of hero. She's a bit more specialized, but in games where she's good, she's really, really good. And you can see the reflected here in the stats. Her win rates are absurdly high, but her pick rate is not that high though. But just given this extremely high win rate, I just had to put her here into the S tier. Then we've got Ursa, who is just a nice tempo hero. People nowadays are usually going for more aggressive builds. They're going with Diffu Blade as first item usually. Obviously, Ursa is great at taking Roche, and just playing a bit of a higher tempo carry hero tends to be very strong in Dota right now. That said, if you're playing in lower tier games, it's maybe not quite as strong, because games just tend to be slower. So in lower tiers, he's not doing quite as well. But like the higher you go, the stronger Ursa is going to become. Next, we've got Slark, who's obviously a very elusive hero. He's got really nice win rates. And we see a sort of similar thing in lower tiers. He's not quite as good, but he's still pretty solid there. And of course, he requires a bit of experience to play him well. But if you're a good Slark player, you can have a really good time in the game right now. He's a nice hero that comes online quickly, and you just want to sort of play from ahead and just snowball with this hero, and you get that permanent agility, which is really nice. So if you're having a good game with Slark, it's going to be a really good game. You can really bully a lot of especially slower melee offlaners. Next, we have the A tier. These are heroes that are above average, but not necessarily broken. First is going to be Lone Druid, who has really high win rates and just tends to do really well in both the mid lane and the carry role. His pick rate is not the highest, which is why he's not an S tier. But this hero is very solid right now. Not the easiest to play, but if you're a good Lone Druid player, you're going to have a really good time in specifically games that are good for Lone Druid. If you're playing against, let's say, an anti-mage carry, like Lone Druid just destroys that hero because he just pushes too fast and these slower heroes don't have time to come online. That said, there's a couple of matchups that Lone Druid is not very good at. Anything that's sort of hit counter based is kind of annoying to play against. Stuff like Phoenix Egg or Undying Tombstone can be hard to deal with. All the stuff that's like on the ground, these like ice walls from Invoker or something like a Macropyre from Jakiro, that sort of stuff tends to be hard to play around as Lone Druid. So it's not an every game kind of hero, but in games very strong, he's very strong. Next we have Drow Ranger, who's a very solid carry right now. She's in a very good spot. She farms quite well thanks to multi-shot and her ultimates. And you see her pick rate is quite high and win rate still very solid. So she's just usually a good choice. Obviously there's some heroes that can get on top of her easily that are a problem. But on the whole, Drow Ranger is quite suitable to today's meta. Then we've got Weaver, very squishy hero, but also very mobile, and you know, he just does like a decent amount of damage. He's not the highest DPS kind of hero, but just his natural mobility is a huge deal, and he's also quite hard to play, so his win rate is not going to be that high. But in immortal level games, he does quite well, and the fact that he can also be flexed to an extent makes me think that we might see quite a bit of him at TI, but we'll have to see. Next, you've got Ricky, who's also like a little bit of flex pick. You can pick him as like a carry, you can pick him as an offlaner, and maybe even as a mid. You've even seen some Ricky support being played. This hero just offers quite a bit as a carry. Obviously, you can just kill supports really easily, and it's a nice way of keeping the enemy supports down. But it doesn't quite have like the straight up fighting power that someone like an Ursa has. Next, you've got Shadow Fiend, who is obviously a mid hero as well, which is nice to have a bit of flex there. You can play him as either as mid or as a carry. What he offers in the carry role is you just have a lot of physical damage scaling. You've got Necromastery obviously giving you a ton of damage, and then you've got this amazing minus armor aura, -7 armor is quite a lot, and especially it's a really good value point, just one level already -4 armor. And then of course recently they introduced this shadow raise mechanic where if you land 2 raises, they're gonna be slowed down, and then you can just get kills really easily. And this is actually a bigger deal in the side lanes where you just have more room to chase people down. So nowadays, even as carry, people usually skilling up raises. There was a build for a while where you just would get like a Necromastery in presence of the Dark Lord and just play around that armor reduction. But nowadays, carry Shadow Fiends usually get Shadow Raise as well. You need some mana sustain to keep up with that, but that's fine. You can get like a Falcon Blade, and you can have a good time. And this hero just offers a ton of damage. You need to build some defensive items. You need to get an early BKB, but you did so much damage out of the gate that that's fine. Then we've got Alchemist, obviously a very fast farming hero. Doesn't farm quite as fast as Alchemist used to farm in the past, but it's still very fast, and now offers much more fighting ability with his Unstable Concoction being very strong. So you also want to go for a fairly early blink with that hero, and just you can just jump into fights and explode people with Unstable Concoction and all the damage you get with Chemical Rage. So this hero is a very solid carry. Next you've got Phantom Lancer, who's a bit situational in some games. When your enemy lineup just can't really counter you, you can just run away with the game. If it gets to the late game, there's just nothing that some lineups can do against Phantom Lancer. For example, I had a game like this just the other day, where we actually destroyed in the early game. Like we had a huge lead, but our lineup just wasn't that good at dealing with Phantom Lancer, and we just squandered our opportunity, didn't really get enough for our mid-game domination. We took like 1 lane of Rax, but that was it. And then the enemy team dragged out the game, and then Phantom Lancer in late game just was uncounterable by us. Then finally we've got Leshrac, who's not really your typical carry hero, but you can play him as a carry if you have some sort of like right clicker in your other core roles. And one thing he has over other magic damage focused heroes is that they can actually take down buildings, which is important in a carry. You can play them as like a high tempo carry. You get like early boots of travel, you have huge map presence, you can push out all the lanes, and you can end games reasonably early with this hero. That said, though, he's not a traditional hard carry, so you don't want things getting too late unless you have some sort of really strong carry-ish hero on your mid lane, like let's say you have a sniper in the mid lane, and it's fine. But for the most part, with Leshrac as carry, you want to end games early. Next up, we have the B tier, which is by far the largest. I'll be going a bit quicker through those heroes. First, we have Anti-Mage, who is really good in certain games, but can be countered quite hard in other games. So it's typically a hero you want to last pick. Then we've got Bloodseeker, who's a nice high-tempo carry hero, also good in specific lineups. It's great if you have like a more greedy mid laner, you can pick a high-tempo carry like Bloodseeker. Morphling is a hero that we've seen a lot in the pro scene recently, and he's very powerful if you play him really well. But he's also very hard to play, which is why his win rates are not great. But his pick rate is really, really high, which is why I put him into B tier. And like even at the Immortal level, this hero's win rate is still quite low. He just has a ton of potential because you can steal all those spells, but he's really hard to play. Chaos Knight is a nice solid tempo carry if you want to have a high kill potential lane. If you have an aggressive support, Chaos Knight can do really well in lane and snowball from there. Lifestealers is a very solid overall carry, nothing much to say about him. Tiny is a hero that a lot of people remember from the last TI, when he was like the most broken carry hero in the game. Nowadays, he's still fine as a carry, but nothing out of the ordinary. He's just sort of average as a carry. He's probably played more as like a mid laner, or sometimes also as a POS 4. And he's also playing as a POS 3, and like even POS 5 is theoretically possible. So I think this is a hero we're going to see quite a lot of TI because he's just a very nice flex pick. Lynx is a solid hero, not much to say about him. Lina is traditionally a mid laner, but she can also be played as a carry. And the idea here is that you usually max out Fiery Souls first, and this gives you actually an insane amount of attack speed. Like 7 stacks of this is 280 attack speed. That is like you're getting 2 moonshots for free at level 7. And then with a level 20 talent, it's even more. So the idea is just to get some Falcon Blade or something like that for mana regen, and then you just max out Fiery Souls, and you just farm with Maelstrom that you get fairly early, and then you get Boots of Travel, you get BKB because you're squishy, and you can actually do quite a good job with this hero, even in the carry role. Next up, we have three like pretty sort of middle of the pack carry heroes: Medusa, Luna, Troll, Warlord. They're all fine, nothing wrong with them, but they're not anything to write home about. One thing to mention is Luna is really nice if you can combine her with Visage. That's a very nice combo because your Luna Blessing affects creep heroes as well, so they're great for the familiars. But these three heroes are just like middle of the pack, that's why they're in the middle of B tier. Sniper is pretty much like a poor man's Drow. Drow does basically everything Sniper does, a little bit better. Sniper, though, is maybe a bit easier to play, so he tends to be pretty good in low-level games. But he's strong enough right now that he does decently well even in high-level pubs. Pudge is probably best as an offlaner, but can also work quite well as like a high-tempo kind of carry. You just get an early Aghanims, and you just have huge impact in the mid-game. Faceless Void is sort of similar to Morphling, a hero that's picked a lot, but doesn't necessarily win a lot. So his pick rate is very, very high. His win rate, though, is rather mediocre, which is why he's sort of here in the B tier. Sven is a mediocre hero that's really good at countering certain Sue heroes and like illusion heroes. Templar Assassin can be a bit of a flex pick. You can pick her as a mid or as a carry, but she isn't really outstanding in either role right now. Then we've got Arc Warden, who again can be flexed as either mid or a carry. And typically these days people are playing more of a caster style Arc Warden, and mid lane tends to be a bit more suitable to that. So this hero actually has really good win rates in mid lane, but in carry he doesn't do nearly as well, which is why he's only in B tier here. Next we have the C tier. These are heroes that are, you know, a bit clunky. They're not that strong. That's that. They can still be really good in certain specific games. Like Wraith King, for example, is really good if you want to have like a super tanky carry hero. Like, let's say you're up against the Faceless Void. You know, Wraith King is great because you can always survive Chrono. Terrorblade is like a high farm kind of hero. He needs a lot of farm to come online. And he's also not that easy to play, so he doesn't do that great in lower level games either. He's a hero that traditionally tends to do decently well in pro games when people are really playing around him. But in pubs, you can't really expect that, and Terrorblade tends to be not do that well there. Juggernaut is just a little bit subpar right now. He just doesn't win that much. His pick rate is still pretty good though. So he's in C tier. You could argue he maybe belongs to B tier because of his high pick rate. I'm putting him here. Then we've got Spectre, who's just like a little bit too slow for the current patch. He just doesn't do enough. It's also no longer like the old Spectre that just like always wins by default if game goes late. But she's of course still a late game beast, so if you're talking about like Herald performance or like lower level performance in general, Spectre is still like an A tier hero, but in higher level games she's more like a C tier hero. Huskar tends to have a harder time in the safe lane. I think it's much better to have him in the mid lane because he's a very level dependent hero. And in the safe lane, the problem is like he's level 1 and 2, he's not that strong. He needs like level 3 at least to be really hitting his stride. So he can be punished quite hard in the safe lane. PA is a hero that is picked a lot. A lot of people really like playing her, but she just doesn't win very much. So I can't really justify putting her any higher than C tier. And then Gyrocopter, I think, is just not a carry hero right now. Like, you can make him work as a carry, but I think he's just much better as a support. And then finally, you've got the D tier. These heroes that you just should not pick as carries. Dawnbreaker is great in other roles. As a carry, she doesn't scale well enough. Monkey King, I just don't think the hero is very strong right now in general. I would recommend staying away from him. And then Ember Spirit, he's fine as a mid laner. Or even there, he's not doing like super strong, but he's okay there. But as a carry, he leaves much to be desired. And then Razor was nerfed a lot, and he does just fine as like an offlaner and in particular kind of matchups, but as a carry, he's too weak, and you need to have like a very specific kind of draft and lineup to play around that, and it's not going to be the case in pubs, so just stay away from Razor carry. So that's my list for the carry role for the TI 11 patch. If you think any hero deserves to be higher or lower, if you think I left out any viable carry hero, please write down in the comments. And before you go, click on one of the videos on the screen that's going to take you to the next video. And all is willing, I'll see you there.